we have people at our United Way that have been here 25, almost 30 years, and we have people that have been here, a couple years. So our workforce in our United Way is pretty diverse in terms of not only by people's background, but by their age and how many years that they've worked here.
So how do you get them? How do you recruit
Sure,
them?
sure,
And if they apply,
sure,
what are the benchmarks that you use or the measurements
sure.
that you use to hire
Right,
them
right.
to retain them?
So first, there is one thing that people might not necessarily expect from us. We're a union organized organization.
Yeah,
So
I saw that.
we have a local that represents a portion of our workers that are unionized, and then we have management.
So
staff.
unions are nonprofit organizations for the most part, or I
No,
thought they were profit.
no. I mean, our employees at some point in that history formed a union to negotiate for benefits and their working environment, just like happened all over Flint.
So
Right?
what's the define some positions that are available with that you have that are in operation that are established
Yeah,
right now for
sure.
you,
Yeah, yeah.
United Way here.
So you have kind of our core of union employees that do everything from campaigning out in the community to raise money. So we raise money in these 200, 250 businesses across Genesee County. We have to have people to manage those relationships. So they go out to work with those companies.
What do you call them? What are their
Oh, well,
working titles? I'm
They're
sorry.
working. No, the titles actually are pretty uniform because of the contract we have. They're called functional area specialists.
Okay.
That doesn't tell you anything.
No, it doesn't.
So we have people that their functional area specialty is on campaign. Then we have people who are sort of
Skilled or
administrative in
Okay.
their services to prepare the materials to go out to the campaigns. And then we have finance support staff. Right, our annual budget ranges between, I'd say, about 4.8 and 5.5 million dollars, and so we have two people in on the union side in our finance department that are they're not functional area specialists. I'm just careful with the title, right? But I think it's finance area specialist, something.
so these are people who have some type of
Sure.
training or expertise, education in finance and
Yeah. I mean,
marketing.
we have some minimal requirements for hiring people here at the United Way. If you want a full-time professional level job here, you have to have a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
Right. We do have some people that have been here a really long time that were hired in
The grandfather
before
into
that standard.
positions.
Yeah, but they have the expertise
And
given their experience.
That's what it's called,
Yeah.
expertise.
Yeah. Now, in addition to the union staff that we have here, we have management staff. We have 4 managers here that are sort of senior management level. Myself is the CEO. We have a director of community impact, which is the person in charge of all our community investment.
I got a chance to. I'm not going to say somebody that was part of the investment, but you work with some young people and some independent contractors here that beautified the city, Genesee County, and I got a chance. I'm going to have to share that. I still have it somewhere in one of my computers, laptops, and these young people were just fascinating. The way they were working and the way they looked professional. I had to stop and ask, who do you all work for?
Right.
And they said, well, we work independent, but we work for Mr. So-and-so, but he works for
But they're at the
work
United Way.
beautiful Genesee.
Genesee County beautiful. Yeah.
Keep Genesee
Yeah,
County
that's a
beautiful.
different-
And I'm like, where is that? What is that? They gave me the number, but sometimes we get bogged down with other things.
Sure.
But I still have that. So it's interesting that you said that you
Yeah,
work with
so
those components.
there are. I mean, we have our core team that does the United Way core work, right? But we raise money through the campaign. We also do work in the community, what we would call project management,
Project management, yes.
where we assume some financial responsibility as well as program oversight for initiatives that affect the community-wide. And very often we're working with federal grants or with foundations to keep that work alive. And so that's kind of different than our grant making that we do. So Keep Genesee County Beautiful is an example of a project that has about a $400,000 annual budget. That budget is driven from foundation gifts and then we manage that process. But the reality is there are another level of folks that really drive the day-to-day work. It's not necessarily work that, again, when someone donates money to the United Way that we pass through our process, those dollars are separated from the dollars that are associated with that particular program,
Okay.
because that's really a project-driven program, and we apply for grants from foundations to drive that work.
Okay.
And
So
there are-
you're not a foundation.
no.
You're not a
no,
foundation.
no.
You are an organization. To define that, describe that, explain that, if you could.
Well, I mean, structurally, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, just like
That helps other nonprofit organizations.
That's correct. Whereas a foundation has a different set of structural rules. They're not 501c3s. You know, they're a different kind of 501 that has a different set of guidelines that requires them to behave in different
Absolutely.
ways, like how much they have to spend
Absolutely.
every year and so forth. So that's a very distinct difference. And we do grant out money in community, but we also rely, just like any nonprofit, on foundations to contribute
To
to our
gift you.
work,
Yeah.
to drive, and they may give us money. In some cases, they give us unrestricted money to do an investment,
Right.
but in some cases, they give us dollars that are
That-
very focused on achieving a particular goal within the community.
Specified.
Yeah, keep Genesee County beautiful. I'm just trying to think of another. There's an office called the Flint Area Reinvestment Office that
Yeah.
tries to attract federal grants to Flint.
Okay.
We have a few contract employees that do that kind of work. We have a couple of arts organizations in the community that we work in partnership with Ruth Mott Foundation.
I see some of the artwork. It's all original. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, there's some like McCree Theater here in the community.
I used to be a kid that was in that benefited from
Okay.
McCree Theater back in the 80s.
Yeah, so currently
What was
we're
that? I'm thinking of it.
even the boxing program at Burston
Right.
Boxing that sort of rose up Clarissa Shields
Yeah.
as an Olympic gold medalist. You know, a foundation may want to help a particular organization in the community, but that particular organization may not have the capacity to manage the money, to understand how to do all the grant reporting, to be in compliance, right? Because they might be it might be sort of a what I'd almost say is a mom and pop nonprofit. It's neighborhood based.
I have one of those that I work with.
They don't have the capacity.
Northeast Carpenter Road Neighborhood Group.
Okay.
Been around a long time, but we never knew what a nonprofit really was.
Sure.
We relied on monies that came through the cities and private donations from the members.
Right, community foundation.
From
might
the
have been.
not so much even that,
Okay.
but the neighbors, the residents of the community. And here in the last couple of years, I've tried to take the organization in a different direction. That's why I selected the United Way to talk to you, to find out how you do what you do, because it seems as if I'm headed, or we're trying to head that direction, because we have a number of initiatives that just don't deal with home ownership. They deal with building the lives of the people in the residence, and that means that we opened up the borders not just for our community members, but for those who would like to participate that live in the immediate area in the region. So it's kind of like trying to figure out how to bake a cake with your own ingredients. So I'm asking you, what type of cake did you bake to make this United Way?
Yeah, well, first, I think that's a complicated question in some ways.
Yes, it is.
I think that the key to our United Way in this community is understanding what the real conditions of the community are. What are the facts, rather than just perceptions, right? Because sometimes what is really happening is different than what a lot of people perceive because of the media or communication and so forth. So to try and determine what the real needs are in the community, look at the resources we have as a United Way, because I don't have $100 million a year to give away.
Right.
I have, when it comes to unrestricted dollars, maybe 1.5, 1.7, where people aren't designating it, where we can do whatever we sort of want with it based on the community needs. So we have to not
But
only
if you could, you would be.
well, but so that's what you have to do. You have to balance. These are the community needs.
These are the ingredients.
These are the resources I can unrestricted way invest in the community. And so what can we really accomplish? And so the board of directors has to make judgments about where we can really make a difference. Because we can't be 100 miles wide and an inch deep. We can't give 500 organizations $1,000. We'll never make a difference. But we also can't just pick one or two to support. We've got to find a balance between taking the resources we have and investing in them in the things that really matter, but then really having something change as a result of it, right? And I mean, this might interest people to think about. This is really the difference between charity and philanthropy. And this debate's been going on for hundreds of years,
Yes.
several hundred years, started around in the Industrial Revolution when people amassed this great wealth, these industrialists. And so the question really came up, charity, by definition, is sort of I've got some money in my pocket, and I'm gonna freely give that money to this need that's right in front of me, right? Sort of on a very simplistic basis, someone's sitting there, they're really hungry,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give them some food to eat
Mm-hmm.
with no expectation around giving them that food. Philanthropy assumes another thing, and that is there's a return on the investment. And that is
Return of social interest most of the
well,
time.
or let's say I've got someone hungry, they need that same, and I give them that bowl of soup,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time I'm giving them that bowl of soup, I'm considering, now that I've got them here eating, what can we do with this person so that in the long term they don't need me to give them the bowl of soup,
They
right?
can go out and get
So-
the ingredients themselves and
Yeah.
make it.
It really is this concept of that I'm going to give, but something is going to happen in return. And I think, again, around the time where more individuals started to develop wealth following this Industrial Revolution piece, it used to sort of be, the king would benevolently be charitable
Right.
to whatever he had to do, and it's super simplistic terms. But this concept of philanthropy really assumes that we're going to find a way to have a return on investment, so that we teach people to fish rather than just always give them the fish. Because
Wow.
if we just give people a fish constantly
They'll always
with
come
no
back for the
expectation,
meal.
we'll train people that's it, right? But if we develop a culture of expectation around getting that help, then the hope is that that the percentage of those people will be able to lift themselves up, right? And that's what we want. Now, I think we all accept that there is probably always going to be people in our community that aren't going to be able to meet that expectation for one reason or another.
Right.
They may have a mental health issue. Quite frankly, they may have been brutalized as a youngster.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, they may have a disability, or a life challenge that prevents them. So there's always going to be a need for charity. There's no question in my mind of that. But philanthropy practice appropriately will lead not only to meeting sort of the need that the charity presents, the sort of giving, but then there's the return on investment where people lift themselves up. And I think that's what at the end of the day, I really think that's right. That's sort of I don't know, in some ways it's the American dream, right? It's
Yes,
sort
it
of,
is.
I can get educated, I can get that investment in me, and then I can lift myself up and be strong. And in some ways, the question is that harder today than it was 20 years ago, or is it easier? And I think that
They say technology has made it a little less complicated, but at the same time more complicated because you've got to have the tools and you still have to have the resources to get the technology in order to make the impact that you'd like to have.
So I think there's examples across our country where people have lifted themselves out in a way that 60 years ago people didn't dream possible. But then there's also people that we think should be able to be being lifted out that are trapped in this cycle that can't seem to get out, right? I mean, I mean, to be honest with you, growing up, you know, and I'm 43, but, you know, 20 years ago, who would have predicted our president, Barack Obama, rallying a majority of people to, you know, to elect an African American president?
Not very many.
Wow.
Some did, but not very many.
And to sort of be in sort of the Western world, in terms of the first sort of
Avant-garde.
African American leader,
Cutting edge.
it's not just, and not just for the United States, but look at Europe and look at the country. I mean, the American people did something that
We're talking about powerhouse nations. That's what you're saying.
So I think there are all kinds of examples of how our culture has changed and is
evolving.
much better than it was.
Growing.
But then there are also
Developing.
examples on the heels of the recession where, you know, maybe more people have less and are not keeping up with the inflation, and where distressed communities.
So you're saying you help fill those gaps?
Well, we hope to, but you know, the reality is we're just a part of that broader network, right? We're a meaningful part, but we certainly don't have the financial assets to just, you know, to go in and, for instance, rebuild a school system, or
Wow.
you know, but
I
we,
wish I had some too.
you're
I
right,
would
but
do
we
it.
can be a partner in that, right?
Yes, sir.
We can be a meaningful partner in that process. So I just think I think if students are talking about something and want to have a neat conversation, debating this difference between philanthropy and charity can be an interesting one, because there's arguments on both sides about what's needed and what's not. I would just suggest that what drives me as a CEO is I think we need to have robust discussion about controversial and challenging issues. If there were simple answers to our problems, that we'd all have the answers, right? But I think we sort of find ourselves at this time where people are polarized. You're either all the way over here or all the way over to the left or all the way over to the right. I think as an American people, if you will, that we're bright enough and talented enough to be able to have vigorous debate and have differing opinions, and then get somewhere where we can move forward. But it's when we're afraid of having those debates that we really all fail, right? I think we all have to be willing to risk a little, and I guess that's to a little extent what I hope. You know, our United Way, as we reprioritized a couple of years ago, we tried to have that push and pull conversation to get the best answer that we could given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And if we're afraid of those discussions, well, then we're not really doing our job. So hopefully that helps you out with.
You have been very, very helpful. I'm not gonna. I know you gave me a time limit, but I have a couple of more questions,
Sure.
and this is dealing with secession, and how do you manage? How do you say replacing those people who retire after 30 years? Because you got a lot of people who are looking for employment. In this area, I know you've probably been bombarded with applicants, and if not, something's wrong.
Sure.
How do you do that? What are the things that you look at when you're trying to replace people who are loyal?
So I think the first thing is you build a culture in your own organization where you value training and investment in people, and you know, so we do have a collective training for our group where we all go together once a year to get training, but then we also try and look at each individual team member and what kind of skill set they need, and you're in an ideal world, you know, you're moving people up through the system, that you're giving them the training they need, and that they either have an opportunity at some point to move up or move out to another United Way, right? So we do have a network of United Ways. You know, there's, I don't know, almost 2,000 United Ways across the country that are all thinking about talent and who's working for them. And so people can move up through the organization by, you know, changing organizations. But, you know, we always have situations where if an opportunity comes available and we understand what the expectations are for that job, that we may have untapped talent that comes from outside of the United Way family.
So it doesn't not necessarily have to be internal promotions, but external as well.
So our director
based on needs, maybe?
Our director of community impact her last job was directing the Charter One Bank Foundation in the Detroit market,
Okay.
right? And it was a corporate setting, but it was foundation work and investing in community. She is from this area in Genesee County. She grew up in Davison, left the community, and had her some professional development, and then we're able to sort of bring someone back to our community who had grown up here, that has gained this insight from this other experience and can then feel a part of the community again. So that's certainly ideal, right?
Yes.
People come up in our community, they go out and get this worldly experience and then they sort of bring that back and invest it back in the community. Doesn't always work that way, but I think we always have to, you look within, but you also look, outside, because ultimately, our question is how can we make, our community will be vibrant when there's sort of a combination of that, and we ask what is our mission, what do we need to accomplish that mission, who is going to best help us accomplish that mission, and sometimes that's someone from here, sometimes it's someone not from here. I think it's a balancing act. You certainly can't bring a bunch of people in from the outside who've never been here and hope that everybody's from the outside, but you also just can't only depend on who you've always been, because when you do that, then you're sort of, I'm always what I always am.
But is there a way that you identify the most talented? What are the measurements that you use? What are the tools?
Well, no, we're like any
assessments, evaluations.
Sure, we do we have a tool that we use that is I don't want to call it, like Myers-Briggs is a very common tool that's used to understand how people work in an environment, to be really introspective. Are they introverts? Are they extroverts? What is their personality type? We do use a tool like that is from a company in the Grand Rapids area, and they help us when we consider hiring somebody in a